So we're sitting here in Appalachia. Where and what is that? Look around. The trees, the mountains, the rocks. Listen to the wind as it rustles along. Feel the spirit of the forest. Breathe. This is Appalachia. The people, me, you, we're all a part of this. We feel it, we hear it, we see it, we sense it. Appalachia, the land that we're standing or sitting on now, the feet that have walked across, the stories, the history. Who walked here first? 1,000 years ago? The ones who were here first, the first peoples, it was their land. And then we have the Europeans, my ancestors. I have Cherokee ancestors. You probably do too. English, Irish, Scottish, German, African, all the ones that have passed, the ones who have stayed, the ones who have lived and the ones who are buried, their spirits. It's Appalachia. And the things that are unknown, the mysteries, the carvings on some of the trees. Where'd that come from? Who did that? The struggles. And yet it all comes back to the stories. And you sitting here, and what you see and hear. And you can just close your eyes and become. That's Appalachia. I'm Appalachia. We're one. Let's hold on to that, and let's remember those who came before, and let's also remember to preserve it for those who come after.
When I say Appalachia, what do I mean? As we move in, let's say the mountains of North Carolina or the mountains of West Virginia, and we're coming in closer and closer, it can never be held in anything. I'm thinking of the beauty of the places I've gone, the beauty of the people I've met. Until somebody is driven on, let's say, the Blue Ridge Parkway, or let's say that they've gone up to Pine Mountain Settlement School, and they've seen these both incredible places and vistas and views, and they've got a chance to walk out and maybe see a bear, or gone fishing, for the resources of Appalachia are incredible. There's a danger in trying to peg Appalachia by its set of circumstances that have put it at disadvantage. And instead, how do we see that as part of this quilt of the whole, this weaving that people are always engaged in making with it? And when you find those things and you move beyond that quick one shot, then that's when the love of a place starts happening, right? That's when the connection with places start happening with it too. But to be able to see a place as whole across time and across class and across difference, that's a work of a lifetime. It's a beautiful work to do too. But the more pieces we know, even though we can never know it all, the more pieces we know, more life our own hearts will have, because we'll be able to see other people's hearts just as well. Appalachia has always been here. It was here for the native peoples. It was here before the native peoples. There was a time though in the really the 1700s when the Scots-Irish, and the Scots-Irish were a wide variety of people, Presbyterian, people from Scotland, people from Ireland, people from Wales, and they were seeking opportunity too. And what they did is they came into places like Pennsylvania and Philadelphia, and all the land was taken. And so they would spill over.
First thing to remember is that there actually were Native Americans that were here before, of course, Europeans arrived. And a lot of the Europeans that came into Appalachia were Scotch-Irish descent. They'd come from the Celtic regions of the British Isles. They came into Appalachia, into eastern Kentucky and those areas, kind of looking to make their way. Some of the first people in were actually long hunters. They weren't settlers. And so, of course, long hunters came into Appalachia for the furs and pelts and the game, for the eastern market, and for also to send the pelts back to Europe. And it was more to make money. And when they traveled back, they ended up telling stories about the game and the land and how beautiful it was, and the abundance of things and how fertile the land was. And that piqued interest with a lot of the people who didn't have much land. They later in the late 1700s started a trend of migration from the east to the west into Appalachia.
It wasn't an easy life, right? Because whose land was it? Was it native land? Was it British land? Who owned the land? Turns out that most of the land was owned by British landowners, and they were very entrepreneurial about it. People think about the Wild West, right? And this is a time of people going out there. Appalachia was the first Wild West in many ways. There was a Wild West amongst the most amazing forests in the world. The forests we know today are nothing compared to what they were. And it was truly a place of grandeur and mystery and possibility this people were pouring in to. Daniel Boone's, for instance, his family had started off in Pennsylvania and moved down to the Yadkin Valley, through Virginia, into North Carolina. And then over the many, many decades that came through, he would slowly start looking into Kentucky along with many other people too. So when Kentucky opened, it was seen as this bounty. And it was a bounty. It was a bounty like none other. Coal was the power of everything. Kentucky was really the last place, eastern Kentucky, to have coal be mined. It was because there weren't railroads there. And it was because it could be more easily gotten in places like Indiana or in Pennsylvania. And the railroads were following into West Virginia. So it was really southern West Virginia and eastern Kentucky, which were kind of the last places. That came to be at the same time then that people kind of began thinking, well, what is Appalachia? What is this place? Who are these people? And these people, of course, were just ordinary Americans, but they got framed through the light of power and the desire for resources. And whenever you take somebody who has the resources and you have the power, you're not going to paint them in such a great portrayal. The coal industry would go on to be an incredibly important part of the economy, right? And people came in from all over the nation, from Alabama. They came, African Americans came because it was not happy in southern Alabama when you were living under Jim Crow. The stakes were up then, and this is the time of feuds, right? Feuds were about people fighting for resources. They were about this time of investment. They were about this time of figuring out, well, who is going to be in control of what's here and how? From
the late 1800s, early 1900s, there were feuds in Appalachia. That's the only thing that's remembered from that time period today by a lot of people. And a lot of it's because Appalachians didn't get to record their own history. There were actually newspaper writers and journalists from the Northeast and Midwest that actually came in and covered these feuds, and they embellished or exaggerated the truth and kept the feuds going longer than they actually did because it was selling newspapers. We see the Hatfields and McCoys is, of course, the most famous feud that most people know of and remember. They kept that feud going on for a couple of years past when it actually ended. You also had people that wrote dime novels, which were kind of like a cross between a National Enquirer type publication and a comic book, if you will. And they ended up writing a lot about the feuds in which they embellished and exaggerated the truth. And that's really what gave Appalachia its black eye that it still is not recovered from today.
That's when the framing of Appalachia gets shown as this negative thing, right? These people without educations, these people who are violent, not people who were informed. But again, it was about this portrayal from the outside, from the great North then, that somehow people were uneducated. They needed help. And that's also because that's where the money came from. We get into the 1920s then, and that's when really coal's taking off. The number of deaths take off. People fought for dignity and they fought for their rights. One kind of dignity they could not gain, though, was after World War II, and there was a massive change. One of these massive changes was about the mechanization of the coal mines. And millions upon millions of people lost their jobs because they didn't need those jobs anymore. U.S. still needed coal. Coal levels have always gone up until really about 2015, but the number of miners have always gone down.
People that were living here didn't know what they were sitting on. So the people that owned these coal companies realized that they could buy their land for pretty cheap. So they would give someone $1,000 for the mineral rights of their property. Well, $1,000, that was huge money to them, huge money. They had no idea that they were sitting on millions and millions of dollars of coal right under their houses, right by their houses. So these coal companies kind of took advantage of the people here. They had really great paying jobs. They built houses for people, but you only stayed in your community. You couldn't really go much farther. So a lot of people stayed here, and the coal companies realized, hey, we can open our own stores, our own doctor's offices, things like that, and keep them in this area. And instead of paying them with real money, they paid them in what's called scrip. So scrip is 3/5 of a normal dollar, but anything that you wanted from the local store at the coal company stores, you can buy with scrip, or you go to the doctor, pay them in scrip, things like that. And then once the coal companies left, you couldn't use a scrip anywhere else. So then people would have to turn it in, obviously, to the bank and get 3/5 of what they originally made. They didn't have the wealth to pass on to their family, and so they were just stuck in this cycle. And anyone that's in that cycle, it's hard to break. When they had to shut down, that took a huge toll on the economy in this area. And a lot of them couldn't work anywhere else, and they had to either get on disability or sadly move away to try to find that same type of paying job, which we don't have around here.
This gets us to the war on poverty. War on poverty wasn't about Appalachia, it was about the nation. The nation was aware of the dramatic changes between wealth after World War II. Appalachia then somehow caught the mind of people. There were a lot of people inside of Appalachia working. They knew they needed resources. Was there poverty? Yes. There was need there too. So it's like good intentions, but with difficult effects. So that's where the amplifying the previous thinking about Appalachia really comes to light then. And these images that were in Life magazine and all over the place.
The war on poverty in the 1960s brought more recognition to Appalachia, and it showed the adverse poverty that existed here and showed some of the things that were needed and that were not available here. And it's kind of a double-edged sword where it brought recognition, the media in, but also some of the negative side that stems from that, with some of the stereotyping continued that had started earlier. There's so many stereotypes, from being ignorant and backward and violent. There's just so many negative things, and there's so much poverty here as it is already, and there are a lack of a lot of infrastructure and things that you hate to see the people start off, with like a weight tied around them because of some stereotype that's based on fiction. And it's really a shame that Appalachians have to face that. And there's so many people that are good people in the world today and in our country that actually believe those stereotypes because they don't know any better.
Oh, I work hard to debunk the stereotypes that we're ignorant, that we run around barefooted. Sometimes I'll go to a school in a city and they want to know what, they'll say, what do the kids there wear? Like clothes, just like you. They look just like you. And I'll get calls sometimes, want me to come and do some work. And they'll say, well, how do you dress? What do you wear? And I'm like, clothes. And, they'd be like, well, do you wear a bonnet? High-bibbed overalls? And no. I'm like, they probably want somebody else because I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to perpetuate this stereotype. They're like, do you have outside toilets? What kind of schools? All this kind of stuff, and it's not that way. It's not. But yeah, the stereotypes, no, I'm not playing that game. And I will set them straight.
Father Ralph Biding was a Catholic priest from northern Kentucky of German descent, and the diocese sent him to eastern Kentucky, late 40s, early 50s, and he was to pastor near Berea. And when Father came to Appalachia, he saw that there was a lot of need, there was a lot of poverty, and he wanted to try to do something about it. And at first, what he did was during the week, he would take his car back home to northern Kentucky, and with some of his family and friends giving donations of food and clothing and supplies, he'd bring them back in his car and he would distribute out of the trunk of his car and the back seat of his car, those items to those in need. And that's kind of the way the CAP programming got started, was through the basic needs that he was meeting by doing outreach out of the back of his car. And after a while, I think Father saw that he was providing a service, but it was something he had to just keep doing, and he looked at making more of an impact long term. Father saw that the youth were a way in which he could make that happen. So summer camps were one of the first programs that Father actually started. That's kind of how CAP got its beginnings. It was incorporated in 1964. When CAP was being formed and Father was putting it together, he tried to choose a name that told who we were and what we did.
By 1962, there was a real demand that I do something. And so I began to think, what will I call this? I wanted Christ in it because he was the most essential ingredient of it all. And I knew I couldn't come up with a Catholic institution, so I said, well, Christian. That's my first rock to build on. Appalachia, because that's where I lived. That's where the kids were coming from, the Appalachian mountains of eastern Kentucky and stretching beyond them into many of the other mountain states. And then I thought, well, what will we call it? Christian Appalachian what? I didn't want it to be a study group. I didn't want it to be a political group. I didn't want it to be some kind of domineering group. And I said, it's going to be a project. It's going to be work. It's going to be that you're going to have to get out and wade those creeks and climb those hills and get your feet wet and your hands dirty. You're going to work. And that's what I came up with, Christian Appalachian Project.
Of course, Father Biding was the founder of CAP, and he was instrumental in starting the programs in CAP early on and bringing the volunteers, and he basically molded who we are. And he moved from the western section of CAP in eastern Kentucky further to the east in the 1980s. And he brought some of that programming with him. And through the years, we've seen those programs evolve. And eventually, Father got to the point where I think he wanted to make sure that CAP could survive on its own without his influence. And so he kind of stepped away from CAP a little bit while still providing some support and checking on things and how they went. But I think Father foresaw that one day he would be gone, and he wanted to ensure that CAP continued on serving people in need in Appalachia, which we have. Even though Father is an intricate part of who we are and the formation of CAP, we have gone beyond that time period of Father now, and we're continuing the work that he started many years ago. CAP was here before the War on Poverty actually kicked off, and we were actually providing services to people in need. If there's one thing that may have come from the War on Poverty that affected CAP, it may have been the increase in volunteers that ended up coming to CAP. But even after the War on Poverty ended, CAP, of course, is still here meeting those needs of people in poverty here in Appalachia.
There was still a lot of need. There were a lot of one-room schoolhouses. As Father Biding discovered, there were people willing to help, but how are we going to do that? And this is where common people came in. It's this work of involving people and helping people be cared for and connected, both within the community and without. One of the great wealths, I think, of the Christian Appalachian Project is also the people who are not from the region who have come here. And I know person after person for whom this is a home for them and feel at home and have been welcomed at home. At the same time that they were helping people for whom it was already home and working hand in hand with them to create a sense of greater connection.
There is poverty, but I don't like people just looking at us and just that's one thing they think of. So what do you do about that? Just from the bottom up, let's start lifting people up and acquiring the means to rise up out of abject poverty. And the Christian Appalachian Project does that, I'm telling you. It's awesome what they do. If you help one another, and that's what it is, you help one another. And if you have the means to help, then help, because that's going to enable them to help.
Some people say that Appalachians are too proud to ask for help. And in some instances, that's true. I think that part of that probably goes back to our past and our history, in which we were kind of rugged individualists and we were self-sufficient. We grew or raised or made whatever we needed and bartered or traded for those things that we didn't have. And I think that through the years, there was some dependency that came out of, in particular, coal mining, and then later some, different types of programs to help assist people. So you have some people that have like a work ethic to them, that they feel as though they're to ask for something without paying for it or working for it is a bad thing, and so it hurts their pride to try to do that.
I do think we need more opportunity to work in our own communities, building up our own community in a way to where people don't have to move away to work, and bringing value, not exploitation, because we've been exploited. Our land has been exploited, and it has been ravaged. When you want to support your family and you love where you are, you will work at what is offered. And a lot of times you are not treated fairly and not paid the way you should be, and denied benefits. And it's kind of like, well, you don't have a choice because you need your job. And I'm speaking from experience. And it's moving that way in our young people, to start taking pride in what we have here and taking care of it ourselves, and not allowing ourselves to be exploited, but to stand up for our rights. To me, what matters is the land and the people and the love we have for nature.
I think that many Americans are caught in the commodity relationship with place, buying and moving and selling. It's a real barren desert in many people's hearts. If it's a consumer relationship, I can move that a lot more easy, right? I can change that, I can go anywhere. But to have a deep relationship with a place where generations of my family have walked through, the trees that my great-great-grandfather has planted, that is not a commodity relationship, right? That's a deeply interwoven, I would call it spiritual relationship, right? Because I just don't have another word for its reality and truth and richness beyond that. And you can't buy that in a store.
Food insecurity in our geography across central and eastern Kentucky is 17.2%. That's 265,000 people, and it's 4 percentage points higher than the national average. The term food insecurity comes from the United States Department of Agriculture. The basic principle is not having the economic resources to be able to put food on the table to thrive day in and day out. Someone who is food insecure becomes hungry when they literally do not have food on the table. Food insecurity is a measure over the course of a year. Some people may be hungry 1 or 2 months out of the year. Others may be hungry every month of the year. So food insecurity is about the economic instability to be able to nourish and thrive. Hunger is literally experiencing the pangs of hunger in your stomach and not having enough to eat.
Food insecurity leads to health issues, leads to lack of concentration, which affects kids in school or people at work, and it also leads to depression. Access to fully stocked food pantries, community food initiatives, farmers who are out there who are able to donate excess product to food pantries or places that serve free meals. We need more SNAP benefits to meet the rising cost of food prices. There's so many things that can be done within communities that can help combat food insecurity. It's a community effort, and if communities could come together and say, hey, we're in this together, and come up with ways, gardening classes, canning classes, ways to help people be self-sufficient in this area.
The condition that someone's in does not define them. Oftentimes it's circumstances that are out of their control that they are faced with and that they are trying to work through. One of the things that is so amazing about Kentucky is the people of Kentucky are resilient, and they will find a way to advance through whatever hardship they face if given the opportunity to do that. So I'll give you an example. The term generational poverty. What is that? And I would argue that generational poverty is not a label that should be placed on a person, but it's a circumstance that that person is in. They choose to remain where they were born and raised because they care about their county. They care about the people that they interact with, and the financial conditions around them have changed. And so how does one think about economic development to react to those changes in economy to help uplift someone who makes the choice to support their community? In my mind, that's not generational poverty. In my mind, that is the strength of the Commonwealth of Kentucky, the resiliency of people, and the desire to make their county, our state, our country, and our world better. So that's one that I have a little bit different perspective on. When I hear a hungry person, to me that's a label. It's a person experiencing hunger. And so those are just a couple of examples of the importance of separating the person from the condition and recognize that people are trying to advance their livelihoods, advance their journey, to be part of the improvement of our state, of our region, and of our country. And how do we uplift them in a way that is respectful and meaningful?
Well, the first thing I want to say is that we are not called to judge, we are called to serve. So keeping that in mind, when anybody that comes into a pantry or utilizes a pantry, it is not something that they're proud of. It's not something that they want. And a lot of them are hesitant to do that. So it's not like we have a lot of people that come in and take advantage of the service. We never know when our circumstances are going to change. So the majority of the people that come into the pantries are working families. And they come in because they have a need. They may not have a need next month. They may not have a need next year, but when they're in need, that's why we're there. So to say that, to stereotype people who use food pantries is not fair, because one day I may need it, and I just hope that if I have to go into a food pantry, that the staff working there are as compassionate and caring as our staff are.
My name is Joyce Marks. I have been involved with the pantry since before it began. There was a young social worker in Jackson County who went to Sister Joanne Lammers, who worked at St. Paul Church at the time, and I'm a parishioner at St. Paul Church. And he said, we need a food bank in Jackson County. There was no food bank here. The church had just a shelf with a few food items on to help with people who were in dire straits. And that probably was even before, I think that was even before food stamps got started. Sister Joanne was quite an innovator. She got a list of all the churches in Jackson County, every denomination, and sent out letters inviting churches to come to a meeting to possibly establish a food bank. So that was the very beginning of how the food bank got started. Of course, that was just the very beginning. Melvin, my husband, and my sons went and set up this closet and made it into food bank, and that's how we got started. I mean, we have people who come in here and have actually cried and said, we don't have any food. And I do believe that. It's, of course, people get food stamps, but if they have a family and the rising cost of food, I understand that they could run out of food and that type of thing. We are really able to help people meet emergency hunger needs by being here. We have a lot of grandparents or relatives who are raising family members or even have foster children and who come here and they need food from here. Some of the grandparents, I mean, they have some pretty pitiful stories. We've worked with them all through the years.
The other day, there was a boy came, and I knew him from school, and I looked at him and said, honey, you've lost a lot of weight. Well, when I get home that night, I get a phone call. And they said they knew he'd come up here that day and said, did you know that he's starving? And I said, what? And I said, why didn't somebody tell us so that we could give them more food? And I said, I'll tell Miss Joyce tomorrow. And I said, no, I'll tell Miss Joyce tonight. I called her and told her, and she said, on his card, pull his card tomorrow, and on his cards, write down extra food, and we'll give him extra food. And they tell me that the lady that picked him up that day to bring him up here, he was picking mulberries off a tree, eating them. And that really, I didn't rest that night, but he came back. She brought him back, and Miss Joyce gave him extra food. But that really troubled my soul. And I prayed that night. I prayed, God, I want you to show me when somebody really comes and's really in need. I want to live till God will show me if a person needs it, till we give it to them that day and not lay awake at night. This is a good place. This is a wonderful place. There'd be a lot of hungry people here in this county if not for the food, if not for Miss Joyce. She works hard. I want to serve the people, but I want to serve God. I want to do right.
There is need here, and we came here with the Christian Appalachian Project back in 1965, and that is the reason that we came here, was to be able to help with this organization and in order to make a better life for a lot of people. And so that is what we've done. I'm going to be 82, and I want to be here. I want to be here. And I'm thankful I'm able to be here.
Both Christian Appalachian Project and God's Pantry Food Bank, along with all of the partners that we work with, are very focused on helping folks find their pathway and their journey by getting resources that they may not otherwise have. It's that forward-looking, community-based effort to improve society and to improve people's lives. That's why the partnership matters.
Back in the early years of CAP, when Father Biding was around, he always knew that there was an issue with food insecurity. So one of the things that he did was allow CAP to be a distribution site for the elderly commodity program. But then in 2007, we had a volunteer who was working here with our family advocacy program, which provided assistance for emergency needs. And what she was noticing was that one of the emergency needs that was becoming more and more prevalent was the need for food. So she started a food closet. She just started putting canned goods in a closet, and as people come in, she would give them away. And out of that grew the Grateful Bread Food Pantry. So we started the Grateful Bread Food Pantry in 2007. Later, we partnered with Water into Wine in Magoffin County. And although we don't operate that pantry, we partner with them and support them. And they were the only pantry operating in Magoffin County, and its food insecurity rate is over 20%. It's huge. And then in 2021, we saw a need in McCreary County, so we opened up a food pantry in McCreary County, the Eagle Food Pantry, in 2021. So we provide food to families through our food pantries, but we also offer a backpack program that we put food together for weekend food for kids in the local school system. We take part in the federal food service program through our camps and our child development centers, where we can make sure that our participants are being provided with food and meals when they come and attend our child development centers and come to get or attend our camps, and then we can get reimbursement from the federal government. So we are part of those programs as well. We provide food boxes to families that are in need of food at all of our pantries, but specifically with Grateful Bread, they can come in once a month. If they have a need for food and we provide a food box, they can come in and shop and choose the food that they want that benefits them the most, because one of the things that we don't want to do is have food wasted. So they have an option to come in, walk around the pantry with our staff, choose the food that they want, or they can take advantage of our drive-through if they're not able to get out and have a pre-made food box that they can pick up. We also do a lot of community awareness with our local school system, specifically the Hunger Walk. Back in 2012, one of the staff that worked at the Grateful Bread Food Pantry said, hey, why don't we do a Hunger Walk? And so we said, well, let's go with it, let's plan it. It's community awareness. It's letting the community know of the hunger issues where they live and how they can help combat that, what they can do to get involved. Since 2012, our first Hunger Walk, we had like 100 walkers. Last year, our Hunger Walk, we had over 1,000 walkers. One of the things that it does specifically in Rockcastle County and in McCreary County is we get the students from the schools to come and give talks. So we have a student from the elementary, middle, and high school come and talk to their peers about hunger issues and what they can do, and making sure that the community is aware. And then that leads them to saying, what can I do to help? And sometimes it's the kids that get the parents or even their schools and teachers involved in saying, we want to do more. We have friends that suffer from this. So it's a lot of community awareness. Our local school students come in and help us provide the elderly commodity boxes, which we distribute in 3 counties. We're a distribution site. We also deliver food to people who can't make it to the pantries. For whatever reason, lack of transportation, illness, shut-in, they don't have the means to get to the pantry, so we make deliveries to them. We have a lot of students at the high school that come and help us pack our elderly commodity boxes and distribute them, and building those relationships. And we have had the students say, my grandmother gets this. You know, I didn't realize how many elderly people needed help. And they encourage their friends to come. So it's building that bridge, and to sit back and to watch them communicate and then build those relationships, and sharing that with the kids and seeing them walk in the Hunger Walk, arm in arm, hand in hand, next to each other, and knowing that we have grandparents that are being served by their grandchildren. It's just an amazing thing to watch, and it bridges that gap. It says to them that we do need to think about each other. We do need to listen to each other's stories and understand each other so that we can help each other.
East of I-75 and south of 64, so where I would consider to be central Appalachia in Kentucky, and then moving into Tennessee, West Virginia, and Virginia, no national bank chains, or very little. And so the ability to reach large capital markets, we just don't have the same level of opportunity. The poverty rate is about double the national average. And in many of the counties, the median income is half of the national median in this country. Land is tough to come by that is flat and buildable. The other thing that I think we run up against is when you're dealing with relatively low income, then the ability to draw in capital that people can make use of to harness the capital markets in order to make a home affordable, very difficult. I don't know if it's a stereotype or a legend or a myth, take your pick. I think somehow like, oh, they want to live like that. No one wants to live in poor housing. I find most generally that people understand circumstantially what is in their best interest. What they don't always have are the right tools, and they're not given the right opportunity.
A lot of the challenges that we see with housing is adequate places to build, adequate places to put housing. There's a lot of physical land here, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's livable land. Doesn't mean necessarily that you can buy it or build on it, because it may be owned by an out-of-state power company, or there's no road up there, or there's no electricity up there. And even, places that I've lived here, my kids took a 45-minute school bus ride in the morning to go 9 miles to the school. And if you're living up on a mountaintop, that would be an even longer commute. And so I think one of the housing issues here is just physical space to put it and access. When you're rural, and you're far away from resources, and then you add a mountainous terrain, that's another challenge. Because if electricity goes out, up in some of these hollers or up on some of these mountaintops, it can be weeks before it's repaired. There's a lot of cable, there's a lot of line, a lot of wire, and there's a lot of trees that can tear that down. Or it can be very low quality where you're at. Digital infrastructure, and one of the challenges of this region, especially because so much of our schooling and our work and our community building all happens online. That's definitely one of our region's challenges, is needing better digital infrastructure. The fact that people can then work from home, or that opens up business opportunities and educational opportunities. So I think just like all regions in the U.S., we've got a lot of challenges, a lot of uphill battles.
Our home repair waiting lists continue to be longer than we can address in a timely manner. We would love to be able to do more. Home repair has always been a part of CAP's programming. I hear stories of Father Biding having his family in to help do home repair projects in the early days. And always with volunteers around. That's always been a part of the process here, I think, at CAP. It really got started in 1978 with the first formal home repair crews. That was how it got its start from a crew standpoint. It really took shape to be more like what we know today in the early 90s. It came under Human Services as a program, began to be staffed. We started to see a lot more volunteer groups coming in. That was also the beginning of WorkFest early on in those early 90s.
We had some groups before WorkFest and YouthFest. My first group was in '91, I guess, in Casey County. Didn't get a whole lot though. I think that after the fest sort of got going, then we said, well, you know, we can make use of unskilled labor, and we figured out a way to do that.
The first official WorkFest was in March of 1992. It is an alternative spring break for college students that come. We now have also a program called YouthFest, which is an alternative spring break for high school students who come. They're very similar. Schools come for a week at a time. They join our crews, our full-time crews, and we also have what we like to call assistant crew leaders who come and join the teams and help lead. We were able to open more projects that way during that time period. Students from all over the country come and get to experience Appalachia and maybe hopefully change some perceptions that they may have had. Our participants, our families that we serve, get to meet folks from all over the country, and there is definitely a culture shock. Folks come in with a lot of preconceived notions of what they might experience and what the people of the area might be like, and they see the reality when they're here. We intentionally work toward doing some education during that time, you know, in our evening activities, and throughout the day, conversations are had around what does it look like? What does it mean to be poor in Appalachia? And what are people really like here? I think it's a valuable experience, and many of the students that leave here say, I've learned a lot about this culture and about the area that they didn't know before. A lot of our participants are elderly, widows, widowers, who don't have a lot of interaction, a family not around, or just don't have a lot of people in their lives for the most part, and they're lonely. We definitely want to try to get the work done if we can, but every bit as important is the time they spend getting to know the families and getting to know those elderly folks that they're serving. And so we encourage them to take time out in the day and just sit on the couch and talk and get to know and swap stories. And our elderly population particularly, they appreciate that.
When I first got here, in the East, there was just 2 people that did home repair, and then a volunteer on occasion. And then here, 3 employees. That was the way it was for a while. And then when we started getting groups in, then we took advantage of that labor. That expanded our capacity.
Home repair today, we have crew leaders who are out on job sites all the time. We also have assistant crew leaders, full-time staff who work in the program. And then we have AmeriCorps members, volunteers who come and serve alongside those crews. And that's the core of our crew on a job site. We also have some office staff that do casework and keep things flowing on the program. A lot of our homes are older stock, and floors have begun to deteriorate, and there are safety concerns. People People have holes and literally are falling through their floors in some cases. And we even occasionally still run across a home that doesn't have adequate plumbing and maybe not a full kitchen. And so it's a whole variety of things that we address.
They call us and explain to us basically what's needed. The roof's leaking or their floor is bad or something. We have caseworkers that go out and talk to them. Usually a home visit, they'll get put on our waiting list. And then once their turn comes up, our crew leaders will go out and then assess the job. Okay, they said they needed a roof, yes, or we may see things that they don't know about. And we'll usually do that fairly close to when we think we're going to start the job. We will look at it a lot of times whether or not we think it's going to be a good group job. Some jobs are more group friendly than others. Once we figure out this is what we need to do, material list will be done, we'll agree with the homeowner of, okay, here's what we're going to do, and then we'll go out and do the job. Sometimes it does surprise me the condition we find it in. A lot of time it's probably economic, that they don't have a way of doing it. They're living on a limited income and they either can't afford the materials or they don't know people who can do the work. They can address a little leaky roof, but they don't have anybody who knows who can climb it, especially if it's older, and then it gets worse, so it rots their ceiling and then the floor. And sometimes they just, that's just the way it is and we're just going to step over it. We'll put a board over it. They just live with the conditions that they're in.
Families just haven't been able to prioritize home repair and home upkeep and maintenance in their budgets. Incomes aren't high. Sometimes you're forced to choose between putting groceries on the table and heating your house versus doing some repair work. And so I think often we see that as a part of the mix. They've done the best they can, but sometimes the best they can do just hasn't been able to keep up with the home repair needs and the home maintenance.
We get groups that come in and they come back, year after year. That gives us a lot of hope. That's what keeps me going. Sometimes it's really hard because where you start, and we can only put so much money in, you can't make it a perfect house, but we definitely make it warmer and safer and drier.
Over the last 5 or 6 years, we've seen floods in our area pretty regularly. It's just a part of living in the mountains, flooding streams and rivers. They happen very quickly. Many of our homes are built on the lowlands where it's flat, because that's where you can build a house. It's difficult to build in the mountains. And so it makes us, I think, more prone to having more homes potentially damaged in those floods and those situations. And unfortunately, in recent history, we've seen more floods and more severe flooding. And so many homes have been impacted and damaged and even totally destroyed by that. Over the last couple of years, we've dedicated a lot of our home repair resources toward repairing and rebuilding homes that have been damaged in recent floods. It's a multi-year proposition when you get into that kind of situation.
If we're looking at natural disaster in our region, these are recurring. They can happen several times in a lifetime, devastating floods. The flooding is because of the geography, the topography of the mountains and the valleys, but a lot of it is also influenced by humans. It had rained and rained and rained and rained. The ground was already completely saturated. The rivers and the creeks were already running high. At like 2 in the morning, everybody was sleeping. Alerts were coming in on people's phones, but people had their phones on mute. The flood rose really fast, really quickly in a lot of places. Here at the Hyman Settlement School in Knott County, it rose up within no time at all. We had about 60 riders staying here on campus. Luckily, one of them was restless and went out and saw that the water was rising very quickly, woke people up and told them to move their cars. But Troublesome Creek right here is probably about 4 inches deep today, and it crashed through campus at 20 feet. It was 20 feet. The water came in fast and it came in hard. It was in the middle of the night, and so people could only assess where the water was or what was happening by the lightning flashes. And that was the only glimpse that they could see. People described terrible smells because septic tanks were rupturing, propane tanks and gas station tanks, so the water smelled. I think 45 people died in the floods. But you can't really assess that, because who died 2 years later from stress? Who relapsed into drug use because of the flood and OD'd 2 years later? So to even assess how many died is an impossible thing. Floodwater during the day is dark and brown and muddy and stinks because it's so turbulent. But a lot of things are carried in it that are dangerous and you don't know. In an instance like when flash flooding is crashing through communities, you see scraps of people's lives. It's like an apocalypse. When the flood came through, we were in the middle of the 45th Appalachian Writers Workshop. We have 100 writers from all over Appalachia. 60 of them were staying on campus here when the flood hit. University Press of Kentucky asked me if I would compile an anthology. It was an immediate yes. We have 60 contributors in here of poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and also photographers. And it's the power of healing in community by telling our story of what we went through here.
We will respond to different kinds of disasters. What we do depends on what kind of disaster it is, like ice storms. You get a lot of chainsaw work and tree work, clearing brush. Tornadoes is tree work, but also, patching roofs. Floods are a different animal, and that's mucking and gutting, taking the insulation out, tearing walls out to get the moisture out so it doesn't mold, pushing mud out of the house and getting rid of any belongings that have been submerged. It takes a special person to work in home repair. You got to have, technical knowledge, how to fix a roof, how to put a floor in, but the ability to relate to a participant and to teach unskilled people takes special people, and I'm really proud of the staff that we have, and can't say enough about them.
CAP has grown our capacity to do more. We are growing even as we speak with our capacity to host more volunteers coming and serving. Our home repair crews are getting larger. We're definitely hopeful that that's going to allow us as we move forward to bring more volunteers in. That's one of the things I love about what CAP does, is that we're a conduit for people who want to come and help and serve, and we provide a good avenue for that to happen, and we see that growing. There's still plenty of people who are interested in being the hands and feet of Jesus, and we love the fact that we can provide that place. I'm really proud of our staff and the hard work that they do every day. Sometimes they encounter some very difficult situations, and every house is unique in its own challenge, and they're dedicated to solving those issues and do a great job of it. I'm very proud of them.
Appalachia today is vanishing. The culture, the land, it's not even the way when I grew up, and that makes me sad. Our language, our dialect, I'm proud of. And many people still retain that have grew up here and stay here. But so many people are leaving. They leave for somewhere else. And it's changing. It's just changing. And it's not changing for the better, I don't think. Hopefully the young people, some of them are reclaiming their pride and their land, and they're going back to the old ways of taking care of what you have, because what we have is beautiful. So I shouldn't really feel all that bad, because we do have a movement of young people who are, let's preserve this, let's stay here. Let's do whatever we're going to do if you want to get an education, but let's bring these skills back into our place and make this place better.
I know that there's some people that think sometimes that there's just one solution to the problems in Appalachia. I've heard people say that education is the solution. And education is a great thing, and it's very needed in Appalachia as it is in other parts of the country. But it's not the only solution, because if you educate a young person and they don't have a job to come back home to, then they either end up unemployed or in a job that doesn't match their employment, or they have to leave the area. And then you've helped the person, but not necessarily the region. So that's a challenge that we see in Appalachia's good jobs. But people, like I said, are connected to the land and to their families and to their past, and that keeps people here, And I think that sometimes we forget that every region of the country has its negatives and its positives.
I think the people stay now because we want to preserve our culture and our place. We're a part of the land. I mean, I'm a part of this land. To take me away, I'd always want to come back. So I think they stay because, come on, you don't leave your family. You always want to come back to your family. In this land, we've walked it and our ancestors have walked it. So that's why we want to stay. It's what we know, and we're a part of the earth. That's how a lot of us feel that way. We're a part of the soil and the trees and the rocks, the mountains. We embrace that. You're whole. And when you're taken away from that, you're lost. So yeah, we stay.
Many of us that work here are Appalachians ourselves as well, which is pretty neat in a way, because we have people that are from away from here and people from Appalachia that come together to kind of blend that special sauce of providing services to people in need here. We see people from different walks of life in Appalachia that we serve. We see people that definitely need hope, and we're interested, of course, in helping to transform their lives and share Christ's love through service in Appalachia. We see people that have varying needs that can be impoverished, and we see people that there's middle income people. I mean, Appalachia is similar to other parts of the country, but yet it's different as well. We see that the mountains and the closeness of family and being tied to the land is something that is rather unique in Appalachia. But we also face some of the same difficulties that the rest of the country does as well. We see the problems with substance abuse, and we see problems in different types of things that you see in other areas. But there's not as many resources here in Appalachia as there is outside. And one of the neat things that CAP does is we may not provide all the services that they need, but we also act as a referral source, and we also put them in touch with others that can help them. And sometimes if we see trends begin, we change our programming so that we can meet those needs. And we also have food programs for those that need food, and we also do home repair, counseling. We have elderly program, we have youth empowerment services that we work with children, child development centers. So we have a wide array of programming to help those in need in Appalachia.